From UFOs to psychic powers and government conspiracies, history is riddled with unexplained events. You can turn back now or learn the stuff they don't want you to know. A production of iHeartRadio.
Hello, welcome back to the show. My name is Matt.
My name is Noel.
They call me Ben. We're joined, as always, with our super producer, Alexis, codename Doc Holiday Jackson. Most importantly, you are here. That makes this the stuff they don't want you to know. It is the top of the week as we hurtle headlong into a terrible crime against humanity known as Summer in Atlanta. We've got some stories that we're totally not going to get to. We're going to, there was a study that found microplastics are in every single human testicle. So that's great.
You love to hear it, guys. You love to hear it.
Yeah. There was an anomaly, as it's phrased, discovered beneath, it's called the Egyptian pyramids, but really they're talking about the graveyard that's part of the larger compound. It may be the resting place of the pharaoh Khufu. No doubt a study emerging due to our recent republishing of famous lost tombs. I'm kidding. The former president of Iran and several other luminaries died in a helicopter crash, but we have more stories to get to. There's controversy about Baby Reindeer. There is a revenge story that we're going to learn about with several other updates. We may add more along the way, but before we do anything, we might need to talk about intelligence, but not the artificial and not the humankind. And we're off to the races. Folks, here we'd like to start with a brief clip from a conversation with investors that took place in New York. This is called the SALT iConnections Conference.
Here's the million-dollar question. Do you believe that a higher form of non-human intelligence has visited this planet?
Right. So non-human intelligence exists. Non-human intelligence has been interacting with humanity. This interaction is not new, and it's been ongoing. And there are unelected people in the government that are aware of that.
And we'll stop at their initial reactions before we continue. Pretty confident.
Yeah, he just goes out and says it, just like it's fact. Just, this is what it is, guys.
Pretty explicit, not a whiff of a caveat in that statement. This is where we introduce you to a gentleman named Karl Nell, who I am currently attempting to befriend on LinkedIn. Not too proud to say it. But this is something that we heard a lot about very recently. This conference occurred in May of 2024, and that single statement, non-human intelligence, the idea that it's an ongoing interaction with humanity, that there is some sort of deep state, likely a faction of intelligence or international affairs, that is aware of this, and they decided to keep it all secret. What? Why? How? Huh?
I mean, given the rhetoric around it and the sort of like types and I guess quality of individuals, I mean, maybe quality is the wrong word, but in terms of like their positions, former positions in government who are saying similar stuff, it doesn't really surprise me. I don't really know what to call it, or like what we're talking about here exactly in terms of like what this type of life looks like, what it might be, what they might be seeking, what kind of encounters have been had, or what evidence might exist. But I do feel like it's starting to feel like a foregone conclusion a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And we know in our previous investigations on the jam yesterday, jam tomorrow, never jam today situation of UAP or UFO disclosure, we know that a lot of people have come forward in recent years, some career government employees, some pilots, which I guess is also a career government employee, but military employees, and they often are a little bit less explicit in their statements, right? They're speaking to Congress like Rush does, and they're saying, hey, I saw this information. I tried to get it out through the appropriate chain of command and process. And because I could not, I was ethically bound to be a whistleblower, but I will be careful to only say the things that I know and I can prove, right? I will not make hyperbolic conclusions or assumptions, etc. This guy, just that soundbite alone, absolutely rocked the world of UAP study. And he didn't, in that statement, use the word UAP. So the first thing we want to do is learn about retired Colonel Nell's biography. All right, this dude has his bona fides. His CV is legit, looked into it, verified it through a couple of different sources. In addition to being an Ivy League graduate, he's studied at the War College. He's worked with multiple Fortune 500 firms like Bell Telephone, lots of defense industry stuff, Lockheed Martin, and so on. He has also been, he's been with JSOC. He had was a colonel, as we said. His military career culminated as the Army director supporting the Unidentified Anomalous Phenomena Task Force. And very important to note, this is not, from my understanding, this is not a job he actively sought out. This is a job he was assigned to do. And so he just had to do his job. And it's very odd for someone of this reputational caliber to go out and say something like this so explicitly, especially when we know that given the sensitivity around clearances, he might have had to have someone co-sign him saying that. I don't know.
Well,
there's a lot of context.
Unless he was going on orders, because he had to say it, because it's part of a bigger thing, man.
Mm-hmm.
What, like to throw people a bone or something? Or
throw
what?
people off. Because you know they're up there planning Project Bluebeam. Come on, guys.
And also, what is a non-human intelligence? Technically, a dolphin is a non-human intelligence. Technically, an elephant or an octopus is a non-human intelligence.
I mean, bro, if we're going by the Douglas Adams model of the universe, the dolphins are the most important thing. You know, they're the center of it all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Don't break up with us, dolphins. We need you. We also looked into, I mean, like I said, the UFO community was set abuzz by this. The idea, everybody is assuming that non-human intelligence doesn't mean just like a terrestrial order of animal, right? Like an elephant, an octopus, a corvid. Sorry for all the corvids in the audience. I forgot to mention you all. It means that there is something that is in some way, whether technologically or cognitively, in some way superior to what we think of as human intelligence. And the idea that it's been around for a very long time is naturally going to set some of the more skeptical of us into immediate opposition, right? How would a civilization of billions of people that can't reach a good decision when there's just 12 of them, right? How would a species that can't for the life of it agree on what kind of pizza to order, agree to keep a secret of this magnitude for this amount of time? That's where the context comes in, because some of the more skeptical in the audience tonight will be saying, well, Ben, why aren't you telling us about what the SALT conference is? The SALT conference is not a legal proceeding. It is not a congressional hearing. It is I'm going to read from their website. It is a, quote, curated networking event for asset allocators and investment managers. You're talking to the money when you talk at the SALT conference.
It reminds me of the Contact in the Desert thing we were talking about internally going to, that's happening, I think, this week.
Right.
As this episode comes out. Mm-hmm. But about money instead of UFOs. That's weird.
Yeah. It's very, I don't want to quite say off-putting, but we do need to know further context too, because this is not the first time by far that this individual, this retired colonel in specific, has spoken on this subject. 5 months ago, back in 2023, Nell was calling for full disclosure, and even someone called this bold or ambitious. He even projected an ultimate timeline for full disclosure. He said it will occur on October 1st, 2030, and he said it might fall behind, but this is what I think would be the best possible scenario. I still, it escapes me here. Maybe we'll have him on the show later, but it escapes me that the Colonel, why the Colonel would make such an explicit statement if he did not fundamentally feel that statement was accurate. The accusation you'll always get in these kind of environments of conversation is the idea that, oh, this guy's just trying to sell a book, right? Or, oh, this guy is attempting to pull a grift. But again, going back to 2023 and beyond, you can see his involvement, you can see his military and private industry career. You can see things like the Irish Star, which shout out to the journalist Alana Loftus, wrote a great article about this. The Debrief has him mentioned in a pretty comprehensive investigative report about whether or not these guys are legit. So with all this in mind, I ask you, fellow conspiracy realist, everybody, maybe with a question mark. Is it a maybe?
It's a maybe from me, dog.
I'll give you a maybe.
No, right. Well, maybe that.
You know what? I'm going to upgrade it to a soft yes.
Oh,
soft yes.
I'm going hard maybe.
That was the hard maybe and soft yes. Those are both post-rock bands from our pal Paul Decken.
Not bad.
Yeah. It was a concept double album. So this is fascinating still because we have to wonder what is going on, right? The level of attention put toward this in the zeitgeist. Is it a feedback loop of journalists saying this is what gets us clicks? Is it a slow burn toward a blue beam or a great distraction? Is it a sort of gradual dipping toes into the water of some hidden reality behind civilization? And then, even more interesting, just to sci-fi it for a little bit, what would this non-human intelligence be? Could it be artificially created by some long-gone predecessor and it visited Earth and it's just a computer that never stopped working?
It's reptilians, man. They survived, a couple of them, and they made it off Earth, and now they're coming back.
Oh, it's a return. So Earth is still the origin point. They evolved from Earth. Yeah. They left. They came back.
Silurian reptilian return.
All right. And they're like, hey, we got to put you guys on to some great inventions. You've heard of agriculture, but what about Velcro?
And corn nuts.
And Four Loko, right? The fundamental building blocks.
The breakfast of champions.
The fundamental building blocks of all human civilization.
You ever heard of putting peanuts in Coca-Cola Classic?
Yes, it's a very Southern thing.
It's a Southern thing.
It's not
I've
bad.
never tried it, but sounds kind of yummy.
To eat the peanuts or to drink the Coca-Cola?
Well, you drink the Coca-Cola, Matt, and then you eat the peanuts, what remain at the bottom once you're finished, because now they're all marinated.
So you're
They're all
saying
coked up.
That's a product of non-human intelligence?
I think very clearly that's the case.
Okay.
Yeah. Or a very specific and niche form of higher human intelligence, one could argue.
So what do you, back to that question, what do you think a non-human intelligence could be? Matt, you said Silurian, reptilian. I thought that was interesting.
I mean, what, like a real smart golden retriever, like certain cats?
I think in our discussions before, this is just my take. I think the most probable version of any of that is kind of what you described there, Ben. Some form of intelligence that is no longer based in any kind of biological creature. It's based in some kind of system that uses power and processing that is not like meat based. So not Borg, right? But something that is fully, I can't remember the name of the Mass Effect species, the Geth. That's all robot, basically.
All right. Maybe there is also the argument that human beings are becoming themselves increasingly cybernetic, at least the way we define that academically.
I was going to ask you, Ben, do you think if we're given the chance, technology will really start to figure into evolution once people start getting like, implants, for example. Is that going to then become somehow a factor in the way we continue to evolve?
100%. It is indeed inevitable. I follow, like many of us, closely the news of the first person to receive a Neuralink implant.
Right.
He's doing fine. He crushes Mario Kart, by the way.
Played a lot of League of Legends, I believe, too, right?
But aren't the threads failing? Or
He
at least
said some of them, this is the weirdest part, the latest news, he said some of them went back in. His name is Nolan Arbot, and he's the first to get this brain device that is attributed to Elon Musk, but to be quite honest, was not designed by him at all.
He's never designed a thing in his life.
Nolan is 30 years old, and you can read a great interview with him that came out just today as we record, the evening of May 22nd, 2024. He said, look, I got a spinal cord injury while swimming in a lake, and after that, I was paralyzed from the neck down. And he was a college student at this time, living arguably one of the best times of a human's life. And he said, I had to learn how to use a mouth-held stick interface device to get around. And the same year, Elon Musk founded or co-founded Neuralink, this brain implant startup. A lot of people were saying that you're not ready for this, humanity. There's no way you can like function with these things in your head. And Nolan went through an extensive screening process. He had brain surgery, which is always a serious and still, no offense, neurosurgeons, dodgy thing, right? If you have to go in for a brain surgery, do yourself a favor and don't look at the numbers or the statistics. Just let it be a surprise. And he has said that he didn't know it was possible that the threads of this implant could fall out of place. You know what I mean? Like imagine getting braces on your teeth, and there's a non-zero chance that some of those braces might just pop off, right? And then how do you go, like what kind of dentist do you go to in that situation?
You guys, that's a really great question. I don't know what kind of dentist you go to in that situation. I just really quickly want to bring this up. Near where I live, there is I think it's called Braces Now. It's like a brick and mortar store, right? It's all windows on the front with a bunch of different places for a human being to sit down and get braces, I guess. I was having a conversation with my girlfriend about like, who would do that? Just go and lay down in a place where there's just windows and then get your teeth worked on. Mm-hmm. I don't know. That to me just felt crazy uncomfortable. I don't know.
Is it a dental spa?
Exhibitionist, maybe, because of the windows?
Maybe. Just specializing in the teeths.
Or a dental spa. That's another thing that's a little more high end. The last point, because I think there's more to explore here, perhaps in an episode. The last point on the implant story is first, Nolan is at the time of this recording alive and well, and seems to have, as of his conversation with Wired, he seems to have very few regrets. He seems to have found the quality of his life overall improved at the moment. If you'd like to read more, please go to the excellent article or the interview by Emily Mullen over at Wired. Quote, Neuralink's first user is constantly multitasking with his brain implant. We're going to pause for a word from our sponsors, and then we're going to go to another strange story, the relationship between fact and fiction, a fringe festival, a Netflix, perhaps some legal trouble.
And we've returned, Ben. You couldn't have set this one up better. I have been really on the edge of my seat watching the story. I have to admit, when I first heard of Baby Reindeer, the Netflix show that's kind of become a overnight sensation, I was a little hesitant to watch it. Some of the subject matter in it is a little triggering for me. I've never had a stalker per se, but I've certainly, maybe had some relationships that ended in what kind of felt like a stalkery manner, or at the very least like a someone not taking, being broken up with well, and threatening suicide, constantly calling, texting, just really abusive kind of harassment. So I kind of put off watching it, but then I watched it, and let me tell you, 30-minute show. The first couple of episodes, I was covering my eyes. It was so difficult to watch. It was, I guess the cringe is maybe a term, but not in a comedic way, not in a Larry David style of cringe. This is just everybody making the worst possible choices, leading to the worst possible outcomes. It's really a story about two very lost kind of individuals. One is a kind of failing stand-up comedian named Donnie Dunn, who's played by the show's creator, Richard Gadd, and a woman who comes into a bar where he works named Martha, who becomes fixated with him and throughout the course of the series begins to aggressively stalk and harass him in just about every way you could possibly imagine. The show goes all kinds of different places. It has all kinds of twists. And according to the show itself and the titles and the marketing from Netflix, it is not based on a true story. It is a true story. And this is a show that, like a one-man show that this guy, Richard Gadd, did at the Edinburgh Fringe Festival, and he performed it, I believe, as like a one-man show for some time. So people were aware of this, and it is an incredibly compelling story. But there are some details in it that may or may not actually be true. And when you stand behind, as Netflix seems to be doing, that claim of being a true story, and then things turn out to not be true, then that certainly opens up people, especially people as potentially aggressive as someone like the real life Martha, who has come forward. A woman by the name of Fiona Muir. I believe her parents had a hyphenate name, Harvey, and Harvey Dash Muir. And then when her parents divorced, she dropped the Harvey and just dropped the Muir, I believe, and just goes by Fiona Harvey. She went on Piers Morgan. He's certainly pretty popular over here. He did that interview with Donald Trump back in the day, but I think over in the UK, he's even more popular. She sought Piers Morgan out to air her side of the story, and it is a fascinating interview. If anyone's watched the show and isn't aware that this is out there, which I'd be surprised, I highly recommend checking it out. Maybe even just watching the highlights. There are also some very interesting dissections of her body language from some, kind of body language type experts and psychiatrists on the internet. It's really becoming a thing because she really comes off exactly like the character in the show, portrayed by the actor Jessica Gunning in Baby Reindeer. She's Scottish. She's, kind of a heavy-set woman with dark hair, but she has these very specific mannerisms and kind of turns of phrase and ways of speaking that Jessica Gunning absolutely nails as the character of Martha. And in the show, it features some mentions of articles referencing this woman's past history of stalking, one of which involves a British politician or a British member of parliament who presided over the area in London where Martha lived. And this is a Labour Party leader by the name Keir Starmer, who, and this is confirmed, these receipts are out there. She supposedly beefed with pretty hard back around 2020 and sent him a whopping 276 emails over the course of 8 months. That, however, absolutely dwarfs the number of emails she allegedly sent to Richard Gadd, which was in the 20s of thousands, and something like 350 hours of voicemails and all of these tweets, and all of that she vehemently denies. But the Sun, which I know is not like the most, it's a little bit of a, tabloidy kind of rag over there in the UK, but they did acquire these emails and they have released a bunch of them, and they are incredibly threatening, and they are very much in the voice of what you see in Baby Reindeer. And I think one of the problems, if Netflix and Gag can be accused of anything, other than fictionalizing some stuff, which we're going to get into in a minute, it would be not doing their due diligence and hiding this woman's identity, because they reference the idea that she stalked a member of parliament. In some headlines that they reference in the show. There is another incident where she supposedly or allegedly stalked the wife of another British politician, Laura Ray, the widow of former Labour member of Parliament, Jimmy Ray, who came out and spoke to several news articles saying that with this platform that she's been given, now she's worried that it's going to come back on her, that it's going to be a resurgence of the horrors that she claims to have experienced back in 2002. And this is another article that was referenced because this woman actually has a disabled child who I believe is hearing impaired. At least that was what was referenced in the show, the idea of harassing a hearing impaired child. So, okay, got the gist out of the way. Let's get to the question at hand. Does Fiona have a legal case against Netflix? A legal case against this gentleman, Richard Gadd?
Technically, in the UK, yes.
I think that's right. I think technically, depending on the main thing that's in question here is like when you watch the interview and you read the stuff, you read the emails, you kind of get a sense of this woman's vibe. I believe that he definitely has all of these voicemails because the actor had to have been using those as reference, because it's not just like a shot in the dark portrayal of this woman. It's, and obviously Gadd would have had memories of her if these events, were true, that he could have communicated. By the way, I'm sure people already know this, but he is the actual person who this happened to. And he's created this television show where he stars and plays sort of an alternate version of himself. But again, claims to be fully a true story, not based on. And Ben, do you think if they had said based on a true story, that would be different?
Well, it's interesting because this originated as a one-man show at the world-famous Edinburgh Fringe Festival. There's hopefully one in your neck of the global woods. Check it out if you get a chance. Maybe because the idea of inspired by or based upon can be somewhat of a fig leaf in at least legal system of the United States. However, as I mentioned off air, defamation and libel and slander kind of rules are much more strict in the kingdom. Shout out to the royal family.
That's right. It is a lot easier to I guess what's the word? The standard for defamation is a little lower than it is over here. We pride ourselves supposedly on freedom of speech, freedom of the press and all that. So the burden of proof for defamation here in the United States is a lot tougher to meet than it is over there. Fiona is actually, and as she's portrayed in the show, a lawyer, though in the show it's really dubious. It's presented as like, is she really? Like, it seems like she's making up a lot of what she's saying, but decide for yourself. Watch the interview, read the emails. They are quite threatening and quite damning, and they're also all signed off by sent from iPhone, or like it's hand typed to give the impression that it's being sent from an iPhone. And on the Piers Morgan interview, weirdly enough, guys, she admits to having like 5 different phones and 6 or 7 different email addresses, which I find really sketchy. She justifies it, tries to justify it. She's like, no, everybody has that. No, nobody has that. That's unusual. That seems to me to be the sign of someone that's trying to live a double life, keep things separate, have multiple emails. It's like it's like being kicked off of an Instagram account or banned from somebody's account. So what do? You start a Finstagram account, which is like your fake Instagram account, so you can look at the accounts that you've been barred from. That seems to me to be the only reason someone would want to have 6, 7 different emails. I don't know, Matt, you've been quiet on this one, but I know that this is interesting to you as well. Do you think Fiona has a case? Do you think Gadd has the receipts? It seems like the easiest thing in the world to prove. 20,000 plus emails. Just present them. And why do you think they're being so conspicuously quiet? The Netflix side.
It's a weird one for me, guys. I'm not involved in either of these human beings' lives. And this is a situation where both of their lives were personally impacted, right?
Great point.
but I really enjoy the show that was created
Very
and the
good
story
show.
that was told.
It's very good.
So
Yes.
it's a tough position for me to be like, this shouldn't have happened, or this, I don't know. It feels like it needs to have been a court case rather than a TV show first, right? So that you could argue in a court of law what is right and what's wrong. But I think we're just doing that in the reverse order now.
And part of the show, too, in the story is that Gad doesn't report this to the police for half a year. And he's even implicates himself, pretty, self-awaredly, I guess, if that's a phrase, in kind of leading her on. And in some ways, like getting something out of it, like he talks about how it made him see himself in a different way, or because she was getting all this attention. He fully admits to having these, pretty significant problems of self-loathing and all. And again, I don't want to spoil anything about the show, but I think that's fair game there. So he does implicate himself. Why didn't I report it? Why didn't I give specifics? It's almost like he loved her in his own way. It's very interesting.
I mean, we've talked about this before in different contexts, but attention is kind of the currency of the day, right?
That's right.
And when somebody,
especially for someone who's a failed attention seeker, like a comedian, or someone trying to be a celebrity and failing, right?
Well, yeah, but I don't know. It's weird, man. Even in personal relationships with friends or a significant other, getting attention from that person is paramount. And even if it is a stranger that you don't know, but it is giving you crazy amounts of attention, it can sometimes feel nice. So I'm assuming that's maybe what happened. But again, that's an assumption on my experience. So I have no idea.
We also know that sometimes people will seek whatever kind of attention they can, even if it's negative attention, and that can be just as powerful and just as intoxicating.
Very much so.
I think that they're preparing for a court battle. I do think that they've been so, Gad said in a Hollywood Reporter interview that he's not going to comment about it maybe ever again. And Pierce Morgan, his interview's been viewed 20 million times on YouTube alone. He had like a little postmortem about it, and he said, well, for all intents and purposes, I've heard that Richard Gad's a nice dude. It's kind of convenient for you to say, well, now I'm not going to talk about it. Because if he did not do due diligence, and the accusation that's being made, Martha's denying a lot of this stuff. Fiona's denying most of this stuff. She's very weird the way she goes about it in the interview. You can really get a sense that she's hiding something. But what it feels like she isn't lying about is being incarcerated. Like they, in the show, she is accused of having been incarcerated not once but twice, and that's also very provable. And even if all the rest of the stuff is true and she wasn't incarcerated, that alone might be grounds for illegal action. So interesting case, interesting all around, because it's like, this is the kind of thing you would normally see as a true crime documentary instead of like a reenactment, I guess, let's call it, with the actual person it happened to playing themselves. It's very unusual. And we know how these things go. People take liberties to do so, but inserting a whole thing, presenting it as part of a true story that didn't happen, period, not just changing a line or two, that seems to be crossing a line or two. So I don't know, guys. I think we can probably take a quick break, hear a word from our sponsor, and then be back with one more piece of strange news.
And we've returned. Before we get started, guys, I got two quick things. The first one, let's get a shout out, if we can, to Mark. Hey, Mark.
Hi, Mark.
Mark is the branch manager of a bank near where I live, and he recognized the old voice and a little conversation.
No way.
He listens to the show. It
That's
was
so
very cool.
Aww.
Very, very cool, guys. And he wanted to say hey to both of you guys.
Hey, Mark, it's a pleasure to meet you.
Hi, Mark.
Well, we haven't
Sorry,
met
that's
yet.
a The Room reference if Mark hasn't seen
Hello,
The Room.
Mark. Hi. Well, he says hi, Mark.
He just says, hi, Mark.
Well, there you go. Hey, shout out to you, sir.
Yeah.
The other thing, do you guys remember a story from last July? It's something we covered on Listener Mail. It was based on a voicemail we received from Max Tout about the death of a man named John O'Keefe, who was a Boston police officer that was found dead in the snow outside another police officer's house.
Yes,
yeah?
I remember. Yes.
Okay.
Wait,
So-
not the drinking partiers
No.
that were dead in the snow.
In the
Okay,
backyard,
different
right?
story. Wow.
Not that one. This is
Similar though. Crazy. Okay, go ahead.
This is a Boston PD officer that's found outside the home of a different police department's officer's house after a night out drinking at the bar. So this one has evolved quite a bit since then. I don't know if you guys remember the specifics, but there was a conspiracy alleged by a lot of people who were kind of following it in the local news there, saying, hey, this feels really fishy. Just that this, it appears that maybe something happened inside the house at this party where he was, but everyone in the official investigation is saying that the girlfriend of 2 years, Karen Reed, somehow killed him with her vehicle.
It felt kind of Stonewall too, because everybody was telling such a similar version of the story. I'm just going to say, because I was on the more conspiratorial side, biases to one end, let's bracket those. Usually when multiple different witnesses are telling the truth about something, their stories are still going to differ a little bit because of the hazards of memory.
Exactly. They're not going to be as though somebody wrote in a notes document exactly what happened that night and then shared it with everybody. Or maybe there was a text thread with a bunch of people there that night, which is what's happening right now in the court. So this is why we're even talking about it again. John's girlfriend, Karen Reed, currently on trial, facing charges of second-degree murder, motor vehicle manslaughter while driving under the influence, and leaving the scene of a collision causing injury and death. And she has, since this trial began, she has, said, hey, no, I'm innocent. She pled not guilty. Her attorneys allege that she is being fully framed, that there's an actual conspiracy and a cover-up afoot that's being perpetrated by a group of people who went to that party, who were at that home, the same home where his body was discovered the next morning. And my gosh, you guys, compelling stuff. Everything is coming out about, the Google searches that occurred by a few different people, specifically this person, Jennifer McCabe, who was on the stand, I think, today, Wednesday, May 22nd, as we're recording this, about the Google search was how long to die in cold, but how is misspelled as HOS.
Jeez.
You type in a hurry. It happens.
Well, yeah. And there are a bunch of other calls and texts that have been just kind of gone over in this trial where it's people who were at that party saying something about getting the story straight.
Right.
It's nuts.
Let's make this right is the common trope in true crime and procedurals. And unfortunately, it's based in truth. It's not necessarily the truth entire of every case, but it is not, this would not be an unprecedented thing for a group of people to say, we have to make this story right. You'll also tell the professionals in those kind of conversations, because they don't speak, they're very careful about how they speak in conditional phrasing. So they'll say, when they're saying, let's agree that this is what happened, then they'll speak it as though it is already agreed upon. It's a clever thing, but it works if there's a microphone around you, which you must always assume there is.
Oh, there always are. Come on, look in your pocket, dude.
Jesus, there's one right here. Oh, God.
Too.
Could have been a snake, guys.
There are 5 in my immediate vicinity, which is crazy to think about with all your devices.
That you know of.
Oh, well, yeah, sure. Wherever yours has been, I'm not sure.
No,
I think maybe the light. Is it in the light?
Spiked up. I just always think about that too, man. That's part of why I don't go to Airbnbs.
Hey, that's why I always go to Airbnbs, just for the
I
thrill
like
of
the
it.
idea of being in a cam show against my will.
But this is all to say, check it out, because there is stuff directly what Ben is talking about there, where there's a text thread. One of the texts says, and I'm paraphrasing here, tell them or him that he never came in the house. As in, they're debating on the stand whether or not that means to tell the police that the guy never came in the house when they're being interviewed, or it is to tell a person specifically about, he never came in the house, just as a matter of fact.
Right,
It's
just to tell the
fascinating.
truth.
Yeah. So we won't go into that. Check out all the LawTube channels. Check out all the social accounts, hundreds of media outlets. They're all reporting on it every day right now in crazy detail. It's probably worth your time because it does kind of show, again, can you actually get to the truth in a trial if one side is just fully lying? Even like, is there a smoking gun in this case? We shall see. Now let's go to the actual story. Ready?
Yeah.
Okay. This one comes to us from NBC News on May 18th. I'm not going to say the title, but I'll tell you the title later just so we can learn the story as it goes here. Way back on August 5th, 2020, at a home in a suburban neighborhood of Denver, Colorado, there was a house fire. This fire caused the deaths, unfortunately, of 3 adults and 2 very small children. One was 22 months old and the other was only 6 months old. All of the people who died it was like a family and kind of family friends who were all from Senegal. That's a country on the far western coast of Africa, south of, I'm going to say it wrong, Mauritania and north of Guinea. We can go through, I'll try and pronounce the victims' names. I'm not going to do it perfectly. Jibril Diol, who was 29 years old, and the Dija Diol. They were a couple that had a 22-month-old daughter whose name was Khadija. They had a relative staying with them named Hassan Diol, who was 25, and she had the 6-month-old daughter named Hawa. Very, very sad. There were also 3 other human beings in that house that escaped with injuries because they jumped from the 2nd story. Really horrifying, terrifying thing to be within a house fire. It has yet to happen to me, so I don't know personally what it's like, but I remember going through fire safety like you guys probably did when we're younger, like experiencing flames up close like that and attempting to duck under the smoke and find an exit. And it's just horrifying.
Stop, drop, roll. And check the temperature under the door, all the hits, all the good stuff. I'm so glad we have fire extinguishers in our cars now, just in case.
Oh yeah, and everywhere in my house. But horrifying thing that occurred, right? All that was known after this fire happened, because when a house fire occurs, if you're investigating it, you're going to check to see if the fire started in the house by accident, right? We've talked about several homes that have gone up in flames because of a gas leak that caused either an explosion or a slow leak. Then there was ignition at some point through a match or through lighting, a gas stove or something like that.
Even an electrical short can do it.
Exactly. There are so many ways a house can catch fire. In this case, the investigators found surveillance video of 3 suspects who were wearing full face masks and dark hoodies just before the fire started.
Oof,
that's
scary.
Like a balaclava, like this kind of thing.
Oh, very similar. Yeah. Very cool that you have that right by you as we're recording, Ben.
Yeah. Not sus at all.
No, totally fine. Don't be suspicious. No. Don't be suspicious.
But just so everybody can get the reference, kind of like a ski mask.
I'm so glad you had that on hand, bro. So there's a fairly large Senegalese population that lives out there in this specific area of Denver, and it was known then like this was a Senegalese family that seems to have been targeted for some reason unknown at this point. So a lot of other Senegalese immigrant families were installing security cameras just to see, like, to check basically for their own safety, hoping that this would not happen to them. Because the investigation had been dragging out for quite a while, months, no leads. All they knew is these masked individuals decided this house needed to go up in flames, and it killed a bunch of people. Until, you guys, the police decided to go a different route, use technology a little bit, which is why it made me think about the Karen Reed thing. They obtained a search warrant for Google, basically, or for Alphabet, however it goes. They wanted to know which IP addresses, any IP addresses, had searched that home's specific address within the last 15 days, just before the fire, right? Mm-hmm. Was anybody wanting to come out here for any reason? Or maybe searched on how to get here, or even potentially used Google Maps or something similar to get to that address? Well, there were 5 IP addresses that were based in Colorado, and the police obtained search warrants for all of those named people, and began investigating them, and through their investigations found that there were 3, in fact, individuals that seemed to be full-on suspects in this case, and they were all arrested roughly 5 months after this home went up in flames and those 5 people were killed.
Jeez.
So before we even get to what happened after that, let's just talk really quickly. Google searches, or searching through any search function through any app or whatever you're using. Should that be something that can be used in an investigation? Because it's happening in Karen Reed's case, and it just happened in this one too.
Yeah, well, the jurisprudence says yes. So legally, that's true. I mean, if we just think through the cold logic of it, the best attempt a civilian would make is to conduct that sort of search through a VPN, or if you could, do the library trick and hope you're disguised enough not to be on camera. But there's not, I personally, in this case, and not to talk too much about myself, but I think a lot of us can agree in this case, it makes sense to do that. It's the right thing to do. People are dead. Innocent people are dead. And then it becomes a question of, to what degree are we okay with this kind of strategy, right? What happens when it becomes, a tool of the corrupt, like, how the NSA got their knuckles kind of wrapped, because some of their employees were collecting nudes, the technology can be abused. And in this case, it feels like it is not abuse. It is smart to do this because we don't know we don't know if or how long it would have taken them to arrive at these suspects otherwise.
Well, yeah, it seems like a really smart move to me. Let's at least see if anybody was checking on this house before it caught fire.
Do we know how many other IP addresses pinged?
I have no idea. I haven't seen like a list or anything like that. Who knows? And can you imagine like how many people on planet Earth searched for that specific street address?
Right.
I imagine there would be some that like share the same number and street, but in like 17 different places on the planet,
It'd be interesting to see if any IPs in Dakar pinged it as well. The capital of Senegal.
And you were talking about the library trick,
yeah,
right? Like in 7, is that what you mean? Like where you see what kinds of books have been checked out and you narrow down a list. And
oh, I know what you're talking about. This one, that one is something.
It's a similar type of overreach, you could argue, but if used, to crack a case, you might have a greater good argument. But then it's a bit of a slippery slope. In 7, they look and they have an insider with I believe it's the FBI, who they're able to see who's been checking out books like Paradise Lost, things connected to the 7 deadly sins, and they get a short list. And on that list, one of the guys they go visit turns out to be, the perpetrator. But sorry, Ben.
No, you're right. That's a smart trick to know. That is a possibility if you use the U.S. library system. That's a library trick. Another one that I'm referencing is that if you don't want to have too many pings on you, right? The library trick is where you go into a library, which has a much lower burden of proof of ID, and you use their computers to do some research.
Oh, duh.
And as long as it, don't do it
in terms of protecting in terms of protecting of course, but protecting your search history.
Well, let's stay on pings for a second, guys.
Yeah.
So there were 3 suspects that they found. And after a long investigation, after a court decision, the Colorado Supreme Court's decision to uphold those Google searches for the keyword history, to use it in the court of law against these guys, right? One of the suspects, I guess, came forward with what happened. And it has to do with pings. He, at least according to his story, he was robbed of his iPhone in the pretty recent past to, I guess, the summer of 2020. And he used the Find My app, right? I hope everybody's used to that or knows what that is. That's where you can, if you're an Apple user specifically, I think, you can find other devices, everything from another
AirPods,
like iPad,
phone,
AirPods, AirTags, all kinds of things. It will find pretty close to where it is using Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, and any other means to connect to the device. Well, this person, his name is Kevin Bui, B-U-I. He was a teenager at the time. He had been robbed of his cell phone, and he used Find My to somewhat locate the last known location of his device. And he made some determination, nobody knows exactly why or how, that this was the home. This specific home is where his iPhone was. And he got some friends, and they decided to set the house on fire in an act of revenge, at least according to their stories. And that's according to the stories of a person named Dylan Siebert, who was 14 years old when he and his friends set fire to that house. He pleaded guilty and was sentenced to 3 years in juvenile detention and 7 years in a state prison program for young inmates. Because he pleaded guilty to second-degree murder under a deal. Again, because I think he talked and he basically gave up what had occurred. There's one other person, Gavin Seymour, who was 19 at the time of sentencing, so I guess he was a teenager as well. He was sentenced to 40 years in prison after pleading guilty to one count of second-degree murder. And the reason why we're even talking about it is because the first person, Kevin Bui, also pleaded guilty very recently. I don't know, guys. This is a really sad one. I just thought it was interesting, this concept of just using the basic things we do every day with our phones as potentially being used against us in a court of law. The thing that freaks me out is if you actually didn't do anything wrong and had nothing to do with it, but whatever combination of keywords and time stamps and all that stuff happens to match up, you could be at least looked at by a police officer sitting somewhere in Denver, right? Just checking out your IP's
you could
history.
Have a troubling conversation, or at least an uncomfortable one, right? So check out our earlier episodes on interrogation techniques, and also, Matt, it's gone too far for us, bud. Our search histories are basically a digital version of face tattoos. You know what I mean?
Guys, aren't there still certain protections where you don't have to give over your phone? I mean, that they're encrypted and they can't just go through your phone without your consent, right? I mean, isn't that sort of the idea? And weren't there even situations where, in murder cases, Apple would not decrypt someone's phone to help find the perpetrator?
In some cases, it often depends on, this might be a future episode, just the digital hygiene, but it often depends upon what other evidence the law enforcement authorities can give to that private industry. What's happening here is legislation is reacting to technology instead of laying out rules, because we don't know the full field or the full theater of engagement. So I would not be surprised if this comes back to haunt people. In this case, to your point, Matt, it does seem very much like this was the appropriate strategy, the appropriate use to bring justice to bear. But then we have to ask about countries with political activism. We have to ask about increasingly authoritarian governments. Shout out Project 2025. Remember, your internet history never really goes away.
Oh, yeah. Shout out to Russia. Congrats on the recent tactical nuclear weapon drills.
Yeah, but they also deleted their statement about redrawing the Baltic Sea territories. Come on, guys. Stop vague booking.
I don't like tactical nuclear weapons.
Yeah, they're generally not cool. But you know who is cool? Everyone who tunes into this show. Is that right? That's like my most awkward segue of 2024.
I couldn't agree more, Ben.
I couldn't agree more with you, Noel, and with you, Matt, and with you, fellow conspiracy realists. We can't wait to hear your takes. As we said at the top, one of the most beautiful things about Strange News is we are never going to get to everything, but with your help, we're going to find new, intriguing, sinister stuff they don't want you to know. So sign up for our next listener mail program if you have a suggestion for a future episode or reactions to this. Give us your thoughts. We try to be easy to find online.
Conspiracy Stuff is how you can find us on Facebook, YouTube, and X, FKA Twitter. You can find us at the handle Conspiracy Stuff Show on Instagram and TikTok.
Hey, we have a phone number. Call it 1-833-STDWYTK. When you call in, give yourself a cool nickname and let us know if we can use that name and your voice on the air. If you've got more to say than can fit in that 3-minute message, why not instead send us a good old-fashioned email? We are
The folks who read every single email we get, be well aware, friends. Sometimes the void writes back. Conspiracy at iHeartRadio.com.
Stuff They Don't Want You to Know is a production of iHeartRadio. For more podcasts from iHeartRadio, visit the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows.